"I'm sorry, Mrs. Hayes," the bakery assistant said, her voice tight, "but if you cancel the remaining half of the payment now, the cake goes straight to the incinerator. Store policy." Across the glass counter, Leo adjusted his tie. He hadn't intended to eavesdrop, only to pick up his own late order. The woman flinched, pulling her hand back from the register screen. She looked impossibly tired, her eyes fixed on the towering bright blue spaceship cake labeled Jason 7. Her son, a small boy clutching a worn action figure, watched his mother's face instead of the sugar rocket. The employee waited, impatient, already reaching for the cancel button. It was a $300 custom order, and Leo knew exactly what that kind of sudden financial weight felt like, heavy and suffocating. The boy's lip began to tremble slightly as the mother whispered her final decision. Leo drove the worn-out pickup truck through the biting November chill. The air inside the cabin was stale, smelling faintly of sawdust and lukewarm coffee. He was 42, though the lines etched around his eyes and the permanent tension in his shoulders suggested a heavier timeline. His home was a quiet, two-bedroom ranch on the edge of the city limits, a place defined by its efficiency and lack of excess. It was functional, clean, and utterly empty, save for the echo of his own movements. He pulled the truck into the gravel driveway. The porch light, which had burned out 2 weeks ago, remained untouched. He carried 2 heavy bags of groceries and the large, flat box containing his daughter's birthday cake. The cake was a simple vanilla sheet, nothing custom, just enough. Inside, the house temperature was set rigidly low, a financial habit learned from years of lean winters. He placed the cake on the kitchen counter, its plastic cover reflecting the cold grey light filtering through the window. Leo didn't turn on the television or the radio. Silence was his default setting, a predictable buffer against the unpredictable chaos of the outside world. He started unpacking, meticulously aligning the cans in the pantry. He found himself thinking momentarily of the woman at the bakery, Mrs. Hayes, the despair in her eyes when she chose the cancellation. It wasn't a choice about cake, it was a choice about survival. He moved to the living room, picking up a stray crayon left on the coffee table. It was midnight blue, the color his daughter, Maya, insisted on using for the sky. He held it for a moment, rolling the hexagonal wood between his thumb and forefinger. Maya was 6, a constant bright disruption to his carefully constructed quiet. Sometimes, her relentless need for connection felt like sandpaper against an old healing scar, a wound he'd received as a child, when silence was the only language spoken in his own home. He remembered waiting, endlessly, for a voice that never called his name. Now, he made sure his daughter never waited. He crushed the sudden memory, returning the crayon to the ceramic cup. The silence settled back around him, thick and familiar, waiting for the sound of his daughter's eventual return from her grandmother's house tomorrow evening. The next morning, Leo found himself at the community center gym, a mandatory hour of physical labor squeezed between his contracting jobs. That was where he saw her again, Mrs. Hayes, the bakery woman. She was working the front desk, scanning membership cards with the practiced, detached efficiency of someone pulling a double shift. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, exposing the faint shadows beneath her eyes, but her posture was straight. She wore a simple navy polo shirt with the community center logo. Her son, Jason, sat quietly on a stack of floor mats in the corner, drawing in a sketchbook. He was 7, small for his age, with wide, serious eyes. When Leo walked past, Jason looked up, not with curiosity, but with an almost adult awareness. "Your card is expired, Mr. Davies," she said, her voice low and even, devoid of any manufactured friendliness. "I can renew it now, or you can pay the drop-in fee." Leo pulled out his wallet. "Renew it, for the year." She nodded, processing the payment. She didn't thank him for the easy sale. She just did the transaction ethically and quickly. As she handed him the receipt, the machine jammed. A flurry of thermal paper spewed out, curling onto the counter. She sighed, a deep, tired exhalation that held no self-pity, only acceptance of the minor failure. She calmly reached for the manual cut-off blade. Jason, seeing his mother struggling with the awkward paper, stood up, walked over and without a word, held the loose end of the receipt straight, so she could make a clean tear. He then retreated to his sketchbook, their coordination immediate and silent. It was a small act of practical shared labor, the kind of quiet support that spoke volumes about their partnership. She managed a brief, genuine smile directed at her son, then looked back at Leo, the momentary softness gone. "There you go," she said, sliding the card back. Leo took the card. "He's a good helper." "He tries," she murmured, already looking towards the next member walking in the door. She hadn't asked about his day, hadn't offered any superficial platitudes. She was just present, dealing with what was in front of her. That quiet endurance was compelling. Where are you watching this story unfold? Drop a comment below and let me know your city. Leo returned to the gym 2 days later, not because of the workout, but to drop off a small sealed envelope at the desk. Clara Hayes was not there. A younger woman manned the station. Leo hesitated, unsure how to proceed without making a public spectacle. He slipped the envelope quickly beneath the edge of the keyboard mat, where she wouldn't notice until she clocked out. It contained $150 in crisp bills, half the remaining balance of the spaceship cake. He walked away without looking back, the action feeling less like charity and more like settling a debt he didn't owe, but desperately understood. The following week, on Saturday morning, Leo was at the hardware store loading planks of reclaimed oak into the bed of his truck. He specialized in custom millwork, and Saturdays were often his only time for materials acquisition. As he secured the load with ratcheting straps, he heard a small voice nearby. "Mister, can you help?" It was Jason. He was struggling to hold open the heavy glass door of the lumberyard entrance for his mother, Clara, who was wrestling a long, thin sheet of plywood. Clara was pale beneath the fluorescent lights, her knuckles white around the wood's edge. She looked up, recognizing Leo immediately, and her face tightened with faint embarrassment. Leo stepped forward instantly, not waiting for permission. He let go of the strap and took the opposite end of the plywood from her. "Easy. That stuff bites if you don't hold it right." They carried the sheet together towards her small sedan. The shared effort was awkward at first, their strides mismatched. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the pavement, but the tension in her shoulders eased slightly when the weight was balanced. When they reached her car, Leo maneuvered the wood into the tight back seat space. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," she said, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "I saw the envelope. You shouldn't have." "It's fine," he replied, tightening his throat against any further explanation. "I understand overhead costs." Jason watched the interaction closely, then looked up at Leo. "So you helped with the spaceship cake too?" Clara shot her son a look, but Leo simply nodded at the boy. "It's a really great spaceship." A brief, silent communication passed between the adults, a recognition of the unspoken knowledge shared in the bakery that day. Before she could protest further, Leo stepped away, heading back to his own truck. He didn't ask for a favor in return, nor did he offer help again. He merely solved the problem in front of him and retreated, leaving behind a moment of simple, functional safety. That evening, Leo was in his garage workshop, sanding down a cabinet door he was refinishing for a client. The smell of cedar dust was comforting, grounding. Maya was tucked into bed, exhausted after a weekend of playing with her cousins. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt different now, less protective, more exposed. He opened a drawer on his workbench to find a specific grit of sandpaper. Instead, his fingers brushed against a small, smooth grey rock. It was nothing special, just common granite, but Leo paused, his hand freezing above the drawer's contents. He hadn't seen that rock in years. He picked it up, feeling its cool, uniform texture. The rock was a memory anchor to a winter 35 years past. He was 7, the same age as Jason. His father, a man constantly chasing opportunity that never materialized, had promised him a trip to the coast for his birthday. The gift, his father had said, was the adventure itself, finding the perfect skipping stone. Leo spent weeks tracing maps and planning the route in his head. When the day arrived, the car was packed, the thermos was full of warm cocoa. Leo sat in the passenger seat, his heart thrumming with anticipation. But they didn't go to the coast. They drove 12 miles out of town to a desolate stretch of road where his father had arranged to meet an investor for a quick exchange. The quick exchange turned into hours of waiting in the cold cab, while his father argued heatedly on the roadside. Eventually, his father returned, silent and defeated. He drove them back home, not saying a word about the coast, the adventure, or the stone. As they pulled into the driveway, his father reached into his pocket and placed the grey rock, a piece of driveway gravel, onto Leo's small palm. "Found this," his father had mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Use it next time." That was the birthday. A promise cancelled, replaced by a piece of meaningless debris. The hurt wasn't in the lack of the trip. It was in the indifference, the cold replacement. Leo tightened his grip on the rock. He hadn't thrown it away, he'd kept it. A physical reminder of the difference between an honest admission of failure and a transactional, silent dismissal. He put the rock back, covering it quickly with a rag. The plywood in Clara's back seat, the cancelled spaceship cake, they were all echoes of that cold, transactional replacement of human need. The small encounters began to knit themselves into the fabric of Leo's week. He started timing his gym visits precisely to Clara's shift change. It wasn't intentional at first, just an awareness that grew into expectation. He found himself lingering near the water fountain on Tuesdays, tying his shoelaces near the desk on Thursdays. Clara never initiated conversation, but she stopped retreating entirely. If he asked about the gym's repair schedule, she answered thoroughly. If he mentioned a difficult client, she gave him a quiet, understanding nod. Her kindness remained purely practical. Jason, however, was less guarded. He began approaching Leo as he waited. The boy wasn't looking for entertainment, just for connection. He showed Leo his drawings, intricate, detailed blueprints of imaginary machines and starships. "This is the thruster manifold," Jason explained one afternoon, tracing a small pencil line. "It has to withstand 70,000 psi, but the material can't warp in the vacuum." Leo, a skilled builder, recognized the innate logic in the child's design. That aluminum alloy might fatigue under those temps. "You considered tungsten ceramic?" Jason's eyes widened, recognizing the seriousness in Leo's tone. It wasn't adult condescension. It was genuine collaboration. From then on, Leo started bringing small offcuts of scrap wood from his shop, perfectly sanded blocks of maple and cherry, to the gym. Jason didn't use them to build models. He used them as weights to hold down his schematics while he drew. One rainy Friday, Leo came to pick up Maya from her after-school art class, which was held in a side room of the community center. Clara was mopping the long hallway, her movements efficient but slow with fatigue. Maya, recognizing Jason in the corner, ran over. Soon the two children were absorbed in whispering secrets behind a rack of discarded sports equipment. "It helps when they occupy each other," Clara observed, leaning on the mop handle, catching her breath. "It does," Leo agreed, watching Maya laugh, a sound that always managed to dissolve the rigid edges of his day. Clara poured him a paper cup of the lukewarm instant coffee she kept behind the desk. It was a silent, unannounced offering, a simple shared moment of exhaustion. Leo accepted it. He didn't realize how much he had started to rely on this quiet half hour, this unplanned inclusion in their immediate, exhausting reality. For the first time in years, the silence around him didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space held open. He saw the way Clara looked at Jason, the fierce, protective determination, and recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood the absolute power of choosing to protect what was fragile. The following Tuesday, the routine shattered. Leo arrived at the gym after a particularly grueling site inspection. His mood was tight, his tolerance low. He found Clara looking distressed, speaking urgently into a phone behind the desk. Jason wasn't in his usual corner. "Yes, Mr. Henderson, I understand," Clara was saying, her voice strained but professional. "I assure you, I did not receive any notice about the time change for the team photos. It was not posted." A man Leo recognized as the center's manager, Barry Henderson, stomped into the lobby, his face flushed. He was a man who preferred to delegate responsibility rather than accept failure. "Clara, where are the signed photo waivers for the swim team? The photographer is waiting. This is a $500 mistake if they don't get these releases," Barry snapped, ignoring Leo entirely. Clara hung up the phone and pushed a pile of papers across the desk. "I gave them to Jason to place in the secure Dropbox 20 minutes ago, Barry. He knows the protocol." Just then, Jason appeared from the back hallway, his face tear-streaked. He walked slowly toward his mother, holding a sodden, crumpled stack of paper. The waivers. The papers were soaked through, dripping onto the pristine floor tiles. I dropped them in the mop bucket," Jason whispered, his voice catching. "I was trying to help clean the spill outside the locker room, and I forgot they were in my hand." Barry Henderson exploded. "Unbelievable! Clara, you cannot use your child as a clerical assistant. This is negligence." Clara's composure fractured instantly. She didn't shout, but her quiet intensity was terrifying. "Do not speak about my son like that, Barry. He was trying to help. It was my mistake for relying on him. I'll pay the cancellation fee." Leo watched the scene unfold, the familiar rush of childhood injustice rising in his chest. Jason looked devastated, convinced he had ruined everything. Leo felt compelled to intervene to defend the boy, but before he could, Barry turned his focus, seeing the expensive material in Leo's hands, a sample piece of exotic hardwood. "You, Davies," Barry sneered. "Don't you have a job to do? You're loitering and distracting my staff. We are trying to run a business here, not a daycare. Maybe you should focus on your own kid and leave mine out of it." The comment was a low blow, a complete misinterpretation of the small, silent community they had built. Barry wasn't attacking Clara or Jason. He was attacking the safe space Leo had started to trust. Leo felt the sudden, sharp burn of being dismissed, of having his quiet effort reduced to loitering. He stared at Clara. Her face was hard, protecting Jason, but her eyes held a look of profound, exhausted resignation, a look that mirrored his own memory of the cancelled trip. Leo didn't speak. He simply placed the hardwood sample back on the desk with deliberate precision, turned on his heel and walked out. The bond snapped, broken by exhaustion, a mop bucket, and the casual cruelty of a petty manager. He didn't return to the gym that week. The silence in Leo's own house felt heavier than ever. He tried to focus on his work, but the image of Jason's wet, crumpled waivers kept returning. He realized Barry's dismissal hurt, not because it was true, but because it attacked the fragile connection he had allowed himself to build. He thought about his own father, who chose self-preservation over protecting Leo's simple hope. Leo had a choice now: retreat into his solitary efficiency or choose protection. He drove to the community center that evening, parking his truck 2 blocks away. He didn't want to be seen by Barry or Clara. He waited until the front lights were dimmed, and only a few janitors remained inside. Leo was not just a contractor. He was a master mill worker, skilled in structural integrity and historical reconstruction. He walked around the back of the building, assessing the old exterior locker room doors. They were the center's biggest liability: heavy steel, constantly rusting, poorly maintained, leading to water leakage and the spill Jason had tried to clean. He spent the next 3 nights working silently. He used his own tools, his own materials, and the specialized sealant he usually reserved for high-end custom projects. He reinforced the frames, scraped back the corrosion, and installed custom-made stainless steel flashings he had fabricated in his own shop. He replaced the old leaky weather stripping with industrial-grade silicone seals. He worked only between midnight and 4 a.m., parking out of sight, leaving no trace of his presence other than the sound performance of the newly sealed doors. On the 3rd night, as he was packing up, he noticed the external drop box for vendor payments. It was old, dented, and lacked a proper security clasp. He remembered Clara mentioning the photographer's payment issue. Barry's job was to run the center, but his oversight clearly focused only on blame. Leo didn't steal the box, he improved it. He fabricated a thick, custom steel collar, securing the box firmly to the brick wall with industrial lag bolts he countersunk and filled. He then replaced the flimsy lock with a commercial-grade deadbolt, setting a new unannounced code, 0707, Jason's age and the month of Maya's birthday. It was an anonymous reassurance that some things, some people deserved to be safeguarded from careless failure. He didn't leave a note or sign his work. He simply protected a space he had come to feel belonged to their quiet, functional family. He drove home, the deep fatigue replaced by the solid satisfaction of having chosen to act, not just to observe. 4 days passed before Leo saw them again. It was Saturday, and Maya's class had an impromptu performance. Leo sat in the back row of the auditorium, keeping his posture stiff, ready to leave the moment the final curtain dropped. As the small crowd dispersed, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. It was Clara. She was wearing a different uniform, a blue apron with the bakery logo. She must have picked up the Saturday shift there. She looked straight at him, no tired resignation this time, just a deep, calm certainty. "The drop box is bolted to the wall," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And the locker room doors don't squeak anymore. They don't let in the rain." Leo watched her face, searching for accusation, but there was only quiet acknowledgement. He didn't deny it. "Good, that center needs to stop draining people." Clara smiled faintly. "Barry has been completely disoriented since Tuesday. He can't figure out who fixed everything. He says whoever did it must be a professional, too thorough for a volunteer." "Efficiency saves money," Leo stated, a shield of pragmatism raised. "It saves more than that," Clara countered softly. "It saves morale, thank you, Leo." She used his first name for the first time, and the casual intimacy of it made him flinch slightly. Before Leo could retreat into silence, Jason appeared, holding a small, foil-wrapped pastry. He looked up at Leo, his eyes serious and direct. "My mom brought home the leftover cakes from the bakery," Jason said, extending the pastry. "She said they were going to be incinerated. She brought home the spaceship one too. We ate it last night." Leo took the small pastry, a crumbly lemon bar. He remembered the bakery assistant's shocking line, "The cake goes straight to the incinerator." Clara, the ethical woman, had waited until the clock ran out, then salvaged the lost sweetness. Jason continued, his small voice echoing the truth of the situation. "It was better to share it than let it be garbage." Clara watched Leo, letting the boy's simple statement hang in the air. The sharing, the refusal to let goodness be wasted, that was the choice. Leo felt the tightness in his chest ease. He didn't need to explain his 3 nights of cold, silent labor, and Clara didn't need to explain the rescued cake. The silent contract between them was renewed, reinforced by the shared understanding that some things were simply too important to abandon, even when they seemed disposable. "I have to get back to work," Clara said, nodding towards the exit. "But Jason knows a lot about those thruster manifolds now. He needs someone to talk to about them." Leo nodded, meeting her gaze this time, acknowledging the quiet invitation. "I have some new designs I could show him." It wasn't a grand gesture, just the addition of a small rectangular kitchen table that Leo built into the unused breakfast nook of his home. It was made of reclaimed oak, salvaged from the same batch he'd seen Clara struggling with at the lumber yard. One Sunday afternoon, Leo found himself supervising 2 children at that table. Maya was coloring furiously with the midnight blue crayon, and Jason was meticulously marking measurements on a paper blueprint, using the scrap wood blocks as weights. Clara was in the kitchen, not helping, but simply occupying the space. She was kneading dough for simple biscuits, the gentle rhythm filling the quiet house. Leo had fixed the porch light the day before. The warm yellow glow now spilled into the yard, a soft boundary against the early winter darkness. The rigid, low temperature of the house had been adjusted slightly upward. The silence had been broken by the comfortable sounds of shared ordinary activity. Clara finished the biscuits, arranging them on a platter. She didn't announce their readiness. She just placed the platter down next to Jason's blueprints. "Needs a napkin," Maya declared seriously, looking at the buttery crumbs. Leo looked around, realizing he didn't keep napkins in the drawer. Clara reached into her own bag, pulling out a small, folded stack of napkins she must have carried over from the bakery. They were simple paper squares, embossed faintly with the logo of the sweet shop. "I always have them," she murmured, watching him, "just in case." Leo took one, a feeling of deep, unexpected peace settling over him. He wasn't guarding his space anymore, he was sharing it. He looked at Jason, completely absorbed in his drawings, and then at Maya, who leaned against the boy, showing him her artwork. This wasn't a family built on legal paperwork or grand declarations. It was built on shared exhaustion, quiet protection, and the refusal to let precious things be treated like garbage. The thruster manifold will need a counterweight, Jason, Leo suggested, picking up a piece of the buttery biscuit. Jason looked up, accepting the architectural critique and the biscuit simultaneously. I'll draw it tomorrow. Clara watched the exchange, her expression soft, finally unburdened. The family, Leo realized, wasn't a promise waiting to be cancelled. It was a choice, made every day, to protect the light they chose to keep on. If this story about choosing kindness over self-preservation resonated with you, show us your support. Smash that like button, let us know what you thought in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories of quiet human resilience.